What is up, everybody? Welcome to the third episode of That LCO Show, your favorite, the hottest podcast about the LCO. I'm joined, as always, by Coach Calvin.
And hello, Max. And this week we actually have a banger week and also a launch of another LCO podcast. But I know you've got something to say about it.
Yeah, okay. So, look, I love that people are getting into the LCO content space. Shout out Shock and Amelg. Love both of you guys, okay? It's one thing I just want to bring up. I love their content. I love the match fix. It was great. Very entertaining episode 1. The only thing I want to debate is as to whether it can be called a podcast, okay? It was 10 minutes long, right? I don't know if there are any length rules regarding podcasts, but 10 minutes seems a bit short for a podcast. What do you think, Calvin?
Well, they probably just got to fit into that YouTube algorithm, but we're definitely gapping them in
the
that
10 minute
department.
Yeah, you gotta maintain those 10-minute videos so you get the views up. I actually didn't think about that. Also, one more little announcement for that LCO show. This is the first episode of video, so welcome for you guys who are seeing us for the first time. You've probably seen our faces around, but if you haven't, hi. I'm also filming from a standing desk, so I stay a bit more fit and healthy. Calvin, if you want to give a little wave to the camera, just act real cute,
I actually just waved already, but I'm just going to wave again because
okay.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Just act real cute so we get more viewers. Anyway, that's enough preamble. Let's get right into a standings checkup at the end of week 2. Calvin, take us away.
So, LCO standings this week. Surprisingly, we do have, owing to our surprise, we do have Peas equal first with the Chiefs, 4 wins and 0 losses. In the third place, equal third, we have Pentanet, Mammoth, and Order, both all 3 teams being 2 and 2. And then Direwolves, Kanga, both 6th place, 1 win and 3 losses. And Gravitas, dead last, 0 and 4, still struggling to find a win.
Eek. Hey, at least Tyran found a KP though. Am I right? You gotta take the small wins in this world. But no, seriously, one of the things that I think we didn't expect coming into the LCO was Peace to be this dominant. They are 4 and 0. They are at the top of the table, and I think the games that they've played have been definitely indicative of a team that is deserving of that, right? They haven't fluked any games. They haven't gotten lucky or just played bad teams. Like, they've played good teams, and they've won. So I think their ability to work as a team and with everyone knowing their roles is really the key to their success.
Yeah, and to my surprise, because we didn't rate Peas that highly, right, at the beginning of this split in episode 1, I think what Peas surprised me the most is how decisive they are. They notice that, enemy doesn't have ultimates, so let's just pull the trigger because we're going to win the team fight anyway. And we see someone misstep, let's just pull the trigger, let's just fight. And that's something that I find very unique to Peas in LCO. Like, not even the Chiefs are showing this decisiveness.
Yeah, I think particularly their mid-jungle is being very, I guess, more active than we were expecting from them. We sort of had question marks about Appy coming into the split, but he's made it seem like he never left mid at all. And then Lisa obviously having one game this week, which we'll get to later, where he essentially just turboed that game on the Lee Sin. But that brings me to our day 1 recap. So, Calvin, if you'd like to kick us off with what was probably the most dominant game of the day, Order versus Kanga.
Yeah, I mean, Order, I think going into this game, most people just expected them to win. But I personally did not expect them to... I didn't expect this game to be almost a perfect game, right? I think so far, Order seemed like they're very dominant early mid-game. And if you aren't able to stop their momentum, they literally just steamroll you. And for Kanga, so far, I'm still seeing weakness in bot side. They had some good traits early on in bot lane, but then they always just eventually lose the bot lane 2v2, and I think that is becoming one of the bigger weaknesses in Kanga roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've sort of seen from Kanga is they're sort of doing the same thing as a lot of the, I guess, top teams, but they're just not executing it as well, right? So they're still drafting in fairly similar ways to the likes of Order, Chiefs, PGG, and Peace, but they're just not able to execute on the same level. And I think that is partially due to what we mentioned before, right? They they have players that aren't really known for being explosive, right? Who's going to be the one to pull that trigger, like we have talked about? Just so you guys can get a feel for exactly how dominant the game was, Kanga got 1 kill in the entire game, and that was like right before the game ended. So they literally, for the entirety of a 27-minute game, they got a single kill. And this was just one of those drafts from Order where you're like, okay, this is just Order characterized by a draft, right? You've got Set top, Evelyn jungle, and Renekton mid. Like, that's just Kevy's dream, right? Kevy gets to play his patented Evelyn with 2 solo laners, 2 winning solo laners, might I add, and then bot lane Senna Leona. So talk me a bit through how this draft worked out for Order.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't express how surprised I am, because like this is a difficult draft to execute.
Absolutely.
If you're unable to get this Evelyn ahead, and if you aren't able to just like continuously snowball all the way till Nexus explode, then Renekton's gonna fall off, Set's gonna fall off. We saw that in LCK. Damwon pick Renekton in mid lane. They solo killed Faker, top lane died. I mean, Damwon killed T1 in top lane. They win bot lane, and they still couldn't win the game because of how difficult it is to execute a Renekton comp.
Yeah.
But Order, they're just showing that, once you give them a lead and you're not able to stop them, they're just going to press on. Like, Kanga, I don't think Kanga had a particularly poor comp, right? Obviously, they do have losing lanes, right? Renekton doesn't really struggle into Veigar that much because of like Veigar's weak early game, and once you get some tenacity up, like the event horizon doesn't even matter. And then Set wins top lane, if I remember correctly. The bot lane 2v2, they eventually winning, Senna Leona. And obviously, not an easy early game comp for Kanga, but like, Order has an early game comp, right? So you're not really looking to sort of headbutt them early on. But Kanga just wasn't able to hold until that, 25-30 minute mark where Veigar comes online, where Jinx comes online, and they should just, turbo the fights.
And I think that's what was so scary, I guess, for some teams watching this game, is to see that Order were able to do that, right? Like you said, this is not an easy comp to execute, but the fact that they were able to go from minute 0 to the end of the game and not ever really take their foot off the gas was something very impressive, right? Especially in Oceania, where so many mistakes are made in terms of macro, and even on a mechanical level, right? Like, to be able to go and just play those 27 minutes almost flawlessly is something really impressive. From Order. Anyway, the next game that we had was Direwolves versus Peace. I don't know if these are in chronological order, by the way. I'm not sure about that. I think we definitely saw Direwolves play Peace, and Direwolves had what some would call the Exodia Yasuo draft.
Yeah, I mean, you do have it's the Yasuo Diana, which actually we played last year, right, Max? Remember that?
Yep.
We played the Yasuo Diana, we went 2-0 up against Peace, and then Peace just decided, no more Yasuo for you, and we just lost.
I mean, the thing that I want to talk about with this draft is I think there are too many things that they've picked to try to facilitate the Yasuo, right? And what I mean by that is you've got a Malphite, Diana, Rakan, right? All those 3 champions are essentially being picked so they can knock up, right? But the thing is, right, is when you actually think about it, how many of those are you actually going to use in a team fight to set up a Yasuo ult? And the answer is 1, right? Like, you only get to Yasuo ult of one of those things at the end of the day. So I think what I would have loved to see from Direwolves is being like, okay, we've got this strong Diana Yasuo combo. How can we sort of build around that and get some more, winning lanes? Because they had a Malphite into Graves, right? And all that's going to happen in that lane is Graves is just going to get 12 CS per minute, farm up, and then be unkillable in team fights, right? So I would have loved for them to see some more proactivity out of especially the top lane, and try to create leads there as well.
Yeah, I mean, the draft isn't bad from Direwolves. Of course, like you said, just too many facilitators, because you realistically all you need is Diana Yasuo, right? Yeah. I mean, again, if anyone wants to see how that played out, just watch last year's playoffs game from Order, because game 1, game 2, all it had was just Diana ult, and then Yasuo ults will guarantee Diana ult landing, right? So I think, alternatively, they probably could have used a more aggressive top laner, then all of a sudden maybe 1-3-1 becomes an option, something like a Camille, something like, I don't know, like just a more like damage-oriented top laner of like their choice, right? And alternatively, I'm kind of surprised to not see a support top laner being picked in the top lane because, as far as I know, Direwolves Soranus is like he does play support champions in solo queue,
He's a bit
right?
of an enchanter fiend, yeah.
That game is actually the perfect game to pull that off, right? Because you do have Diana Yasuo. If you have like a Lulu, if you have like a Janna or something, it's just really perfect for that game.
I'm very glad it didn't get picked. I think we'd all be bored out of our minds watching that happen. So personally, yeah, I think it could be good in the draft, but definitely glad it wasn't picked. But yeah, this is the game that I was talking about a bit before, where Lisa had an absolute banger. He was essentially just running the early game, and when you're playing Lee Sin in this game, you sort of have to make stuff happen early and mid, right? Because as soon as Diana gets her items, as soon as Yasuo gets online too, it becomes very difficult for your champion to function, right? You just lose the 1v1 versus both of those champions, and you sort of default into a kick bot. But Lisa was able to find some really good skirmishers in that early game, and then essentially they were just able to blow that lead out of control.
Yeah, I mean, Lisa definitely had a really good performance that game. And one thing I also want to highlight is actually RP, picking that Gragas. So I think during the interview in day 2, someone from Peace did mention that, it was actually because Cheon didn't have the time to pick the champion, or like he couldn't find the champion or something like that. So he just picked Gragas, and then and I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna take Gragas into Yasuo. I mean, like, it's not a bad matchup, I think. Yasuo just gets body slammed off cooldown. But like, imagine like you just given a random champion, and then you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna play it. It doesn't matter. We're still gonna win the game.
Gragas, right? Like, at least it wasn't some actually just complete random champion in that spot. But I think exhaust Gragas mid, I think that's going to be one of the most frustrating things to play against as both Yasuo and Diana, right? Like, if you're 100%. Gragas in these team fights, all you do is you're watching Diana and you're just never letting her enter the fight, right? Like, you're body slamming her, you're ulting her, you're just making sure Diana's not getting in anywhere near your team. So I think it actually ended, it was one of those things where it was a mistake, but it was for the better. It was actually for the better. I don't know what else they would have picked in that spot, but yeah.
And it's the same thing with like Tryndamere as well, right? I think teams are banning Tryndamere so often. Like, why don't people just try Gragas mid lane? Like, it's such a good matchup into Tryndamere as well. Yeah, it's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same reason as like Gragas to Yasuo, where you just continuously deny any engaged potential from these champions. So I'm actually surprised to see so many Tryndamere bans in LCO so far.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things that teams would rather not deal with, because it does sort of require a different approach to team fights, in that, you have to spend a lot more resources, I guess, dealing with that threat for the extra 5 seconds that, he can't die. One other thing that I want to bring up about Peace is Beats. Now, Beats currently has a 19.7 KDA. At the end of week 2, which is absolutely crazy. And I think that he has sort of been the unsung hero of this team. I think he's played really, really well, known his role, and he's not been getting caught out on these enchanter picks. He's always providing value in fights. Yeah, as an ex-teammate, I'm very happy that he's performing this well.
Yeah, I mean, Beats has mostly been a stage god, right? I think even last year, from my memory, he does perform a lot better on stage, and I'm really happy because like this guy just came off and a week with like perfect KDA, right? If I remember correctly. Like, I think both days he didn't die a single time on Lulu and on Lux. So props to him, and this guy definitely deserves a more compliment than he did.
Let's go, David. Anyway. The next game that we had was Chiefs versus Gravitas, where, honestly, I was very surprised by how much Gravitas actually challenged and succeeded in challenging Chiefs in the early game.
Yeah, I mean, we said it last week, right? Chiefs' early game is surprisingly weak, and it still shows this week, because, like, Tally got forced to flash, I think, level 2 into a Kiana as TF. Like, that's not something that should happen. Oh, actually, maybe level 3, but like, it's just not something that should happen. I feel like, I had to look at that game again. if the Jung like timed the his stun into the TF gold card, he probably gets the kill too. So like that's a lot of lane mistakes coming in from Tally this week and last week, and also Arthur actually taking unfavorable fights early on and getting himself or his teammates killed is also something that happens quite often on Chiefs. So
yeah, that's a pattern that I think we're sort of starting to see, is that Arthur just gets caught out doing random stuff in a lot of games. Like there's been two games where he's been clearing a ward that he just shouldn't be clearing, gets caught out and dies, right? And I think that that's just a mistake that when you are Arthur, right? Like you've played in the LCK, right? You can't be making those mistakes. You need to be, I guess, the pinnacle of your team. You need to be making sure you're always being consistent and not making those silly errors. Because, to be frank, like that's just not a player of that caliber shouldn't be making those mistakes, and definitely not making them repeatedly, like we're seeing.
Yeah, and also one thing I want to highlight though is Tapu still is that solid top laner that sort of saves Chiefs from the early game, right? Because I mean, yes, he gave Tyran his first ever kill in the LCO.
Yeah.
But that was actually a good death because he did get his wave into Tyran's turret and also like that denied a lot of minions from Tyran. But Tapoon, like he is the guy that we complimented, last week, even the week before, like before LCO even started, and he is still that sort of that rock, not really the rock in top lane because that was
he was the rock on day two.
It was. It was a rocket day too, actually. But yeah, so he is that carry player. He is the player that sort of Chiefs will rely on every single game, and that sort of pulls them into that mid lane game where Chiefs is looking pretty solid and pretty dominating.
Yeah. Okay, on to the match of the day.
The banger.
I think I would go as far to say this is the match so far of the LCO, and even I don't know if we're gonna get a game like as big of an upset as this. So the game was
expected that.
The game was Mammoth versus PGG. Mammoth took out the W off a monstrous performance from their solo laners. Ryu Fury, I don't know how many solo kills he got. I think he got like 3 solo kills in that game versus Yuri. Yuri ending up 0 and 6. So Calvin, take me through how this actually happened.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that game boosted Ryu Fury to like the top of the solo kill leaderboard.
He's top. He's got 6 solo kills.
This guy has 6 solo kills so far in just 2 weeks of LCO. That's pretty insane. But I don't know, like when you have a Korean import, obviously, I mean, people do have off days, people do int and stuff, but like Yuri doesn't seem like he is confident in Corki. And having a 0-6 performance is pretty int, to be honest.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think if you look at all the Corki versus Trinity matchups, if the player aren't as confident on Corki, they usually just take Exhaust. Or they take Ghost.
Or Ghost,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, it's either Exhaust or you take Ghost, and the Trinity usually gets neutralized, and Corki just outperforms Trinity in every single, or should outperform Trinity in every single team fight because of the package. Right?
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case, and PGG, they look like they don't know what to do, right? Like they had Praedith on, I think, Jinx. Is it Jinx or Aphelios? I think it's Jinx, right? And he is farming up a Storm, right? He's 12 CS per minute, and all he need is his team to guarantee him like a kill or like a decent DPS position, and PGG just wasn't able to do that.
Yeah, I think it is definitely a sign of worry when your superstar mid laner can't play the best champion on the patch, right? Like, you need to be able to play Corki as a mid laner. This champion is so broken, and if you... It creates such a problem in draft if you have to start banning all these champions for it, right? Because Trindam is not the only answer to it, and if you're starting to have to waste bans on champions that you wouldn't really expect to dominate the Corki like this, it becomes a bit of a challenge. That being said, I think there were some definite clear holes in Mammoth's gameplay, particularly around the mid to late game. Rusty did a really good job of calling it out in terms of if you just send your Trinity in a side lane, who is going to match him? You have a Gragas, you have a Corki. Neither of those champions are going to be able to kill him. Neither of those champions are going to be able to really deny his push. So if you just send him to the side, but instead they were opting for, just send everyone mid, pray for a fight. And it ended up working, right? It ended up working. So props to Mammoth for being able to find a draft that works. And they were able to bring down what people thought was the best team in the league.
Yeah,
But,
I mean, like the Twitch vote was like 97 to 3% or something like that. Like something insane.
Yeah, it was crazy. But actually, we are joined by a special guest to help us go through and I guess break down the win from Mammoth's perspective. So I sat down with Ash earlier today and asked him a few questions and quizzed him. So let's cut to that. I am now joined by the head coach of Mammoth Esports Club, Ash. Ash, how are you?
I'm good. It's a pleasure to be here. How you guys doing?
We're good. You are one of the only coaches that can say that they went 2-0 in week 2. How does that feel?
It feels great. And it's very surprising. I'll be real with you. I don't think any of us expected to beat PGG. But here we are.
Yep. I definitely think all the gambling sites did not expect that either, if you looked at some of the odds. But hey, it happened. So
yeah, there was that guy that bet like $1,000 on PGG winning or something, right?
Yeah, and then he just flamed all the players on Twitter after they lost. Yeah. Okay, so as you know, as is customary, we are running that LCO show hot seat. So 1 minute, 5 questions. It took me a bit of a while to come up with these questions, but they're all pretty recent. So they're all like related to either this week or the week before, something like that. So if you've been paying close attention, you should be good to go. Let me just get my 1 minute timer up. Are you ready, Ash?
I am ready.
Okay, ready, set, let's go. Okay, name the 3 teams that currently have a negative record in the LCO.
Oh gosh. PGG. Oh, that's not even true. Direwolves.
Yep.
Gravitas.
Yep.
And
Boing boing.
Kanga?
Yeah, bang. Okay. Second question. What was your team comp in your win versus PGG?
Vladimir, Viego, Trinamir, Senna, Nautilus.
Very nice. Good coach. Okay. What is the only team that hasn't killed a single Baron this split?
Is it Gravitas?
No, it's Kanga. Okay, we'll go on to the next one in the interest of time. Who currently has the highest KDA out of all LCO players?
Voice.
I'll give you a hint. They play support.
Oh, real?
We got 10 seconds.
I'm actually not sure.
Okay, it's Beats, 19.7. Name all 4 Gravitas top laners.
Tyran, Tomasino, Azus, Safa?
Oh, the last one was nobody.
No, but
Okay,
yeah,
so what did you get? I think you got
like 2.
2. Wow. Okay, so you didn't even beat Rusty. Okay, so
Dude, I'm not good at this.
that's okay. It's all right. So 2 out of 5. It's not bad. It's respectable. It's almost at the halfway mark. So to be fair, there were some like pretty tricky questions in there. Naming all 4 Gravitas top laners was definitely one of the weird ones.
It's a mission.
It is. Okay, now onto the more serious interview questions. So, you guys are now tied for 3rd, right? What sort of message do you think having a 2-0 week has sent not only to your team, but to the rest of the league?
I think it's told the rest of the league not to underestimate us. Yes, we still have a lot to learn, but when we're given the picks that we know we can perform on, and we're actually ready and prepared for a team, then I think we can take a lot of people out and we'll catch a lot of people by surprise.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I think I found so surprising about your win as well, is it wasn't like one of those wins where you sort of cheese the win or there's some like cheeky backdoor that happens. Like, it was just a fair, like 5-on-5, your players played better than PGG's players, which was like really surprising to see. And that's, I think, what took me most by surprise. A bit to that point, right? Both your solo laners, so both Tron and Ryu Fury, outperformed their opposing solo laners, and that's Winterer and Yuri that we're talking about, right? Like, these guys are like some of the best in role. And they were playing like Vlad and Tryndamere, right? So it's not standard picks. Are these sort of flexible champion pools something that we can expect from these new rookie players?
Yes. We've been talking to them a lot about these champion pools.
Yep.
And we've obviously also been looking at the meta, right? And we just realized it's way better for us to pick A, what we're comfortable on, and B, pick things that are, I guess, good answers to what's meta right now.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the top lane, right, you have Gragas. Vladimir's lovely. Same thing with Corki and Tryndamere.
Yeah, I think 100%. Like, having those picks that teams aren't really expecting and aren't really preparing for is really good. And like both those picks really make sense. One thing I do want to talk about though is how dominant Ryu Fury was in that game versus PGG. Like he was absolutely turboing Yuri. Going into game, was he like really confident in the matchup, or was it sort of something that you just were surprised by as well?
He was certainly like very confident in the matchup.
Yeah.
I've spoken to him hundreds of times before. He loves playing Tournament.
Okay.
And he loves playing it into the Corki just because it's a free win for him basically.
Yeah.
And we still spent, Ro especially spends hours and hours on the draft thinking of every possible scenario. We know what's coming, but Roo still surprised us. I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
That guy killed it.
I mean, some of the angles that he found and just his positioning on the map to be able to like always know where Corki is was
that
really
kill on Krugs, like who expects that?
Yeah, I know. It was very impressive. Okay, speaking about something a bit less clean than that win was your game versus Gravitas. Why do you think your game versus PGG was actually a lot cleaner than your game versus Gravitas?
Our players went into the game versus PGG with lower expectations of themselves versus their opponent.
Okay.
They went into the game versus Gravitas very cocky.
Right.
And it showed.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, a bit of the overconfidence showing up.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then sort of stepping away from your team as a whole, but Zeri becomes available for play next week in the LCO. And she's not nerfed. This is 12.2 Zeri, by the way. This is pre-nerf.
This is Runan's Zeri, you know what I'm saying?
What are you estimating? If you had to give me like a number for her presence, what do you think it's going to be at?
I think it'll be close to 90%.
Okay.
As long as teams can actually play her.
Yeah.
I've seen Liv playing it a bit in solo queue, so I'm expecting them to bring it out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay,
I think it'll be high.
I think one of the biggest things is its ability to be flexed, and its lane dominance. Like, I've been talking to a lot of bot laners, and there is no way you can get lane bush control level 1, because her Q's on a 2-second cooldown, and you can just perma-fire it into the bush, and there's nothing that you can do, right? You're just going to get chunked if you walk in. So 90% is the Arsh prediction for Zeri. Okay, interesting. Okay, well, that about wraps us up for the questions that we had planned. Thank you so much for joining us, Arsh, and best of luck in the coming weeks. Hope to see some more 2-0s.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'll be keen to talk to you guys again sometime.
Thanks. See you, Arsh.
Later.
Alright. Okay, so, I mean, pretty good insights from Arsh there. I think it was pretty funny to hear how his team was more confident. I guess they played better going into PGG than they did versus Gravitas. I think that's something that you don't really think of when you're not a player, but the weight of expectation can actually be a blessing sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I guess they probably went into the PGG game like without any expectations, right? So like the players are usually less stressed.
Yeah.
And they just sort of play, they just play it, right? They just treat it as another solo queue game, maybe a scrim game, and they just probably just outperformed. And when they played against Gravitas, like they obviously were trying harder, or like I mean they were a little more like cocky, but then when the game becomes a chaotic mess, like they started trying harder, and you're starting to see like sort of like panic plays. Yeah. You're starting to see a lot of like really, really questionable decisions.
100%. But anyway, moving on to day 2. So the first game that we had was PGG versus Direwolves, and when I say the Belkan 1v9 this game, I mean it. Like, this draft from Direwolves was great. When I watched this, I was like, wow, this is a really solid draft. They've got a really good plan to shut down the Corki. But Belkan, my god, did this guy play out of his mind?
Yeah, I mean, that Jarvan play is just disgusting. Like, that is basically textbook Jarvan right there. If if any player needs to study a VOD from Jarvan on Jarvan, just watch that. Like,
yeah, no,
that man single-handedly just carried the game.
I found the game so funny because like when we reached the 20-25 minute mark, he would literally just run mid and ult. Right, like he was taking mid waves. He was being like, "Fuck it, guys, we're pushing this wave." He shoves the wave, dives them under their tier 3 turret, walks away. It's just like this guy has just no fear whatsoever. He sees a play and he makes it. Like it was just crazy. He was running the early game, running the mid game, and he never took his foot off the gas.
Yeah, and I think then like the question right now is whether Yuri can match Balkan, right? Because I think Balkan's performance, I mean personally he has been outperforming my expectations because I did say last time he was in OPL he changed the meta, but then I guess he never really impressed me like as much as people think.
Yeah.
And so right now he's back into LCO and Yuri like his mid laner. Yes, his day 2 Corki is a lot better than day 1, or week day 1 actually.
Yeah.
But he still didn't do much, right? Like, I mean, obviously, Corki is still Corki, he still did like probably most damage, but like he's not spectacular at all. So I really want to see more from Yuri.
Yeah, I think there definitely is a lot of room for him to, I guess, live up to what people's expectations were of him coming into the league. I don't know how much of that is like a Corki issue because we saw when his tournament game, I think it was the first game they played, was extremely dominant, right? So it could be that the meta just isn't suiting him right now. Like he's not as practiced on Corki as he is some more aggressive picks. But
yeah, maybe he just have like a really specific champion pool.
Yeah, but I 100% agree with you. When you do have such a superstar, such a talent of a mid laner, you need them to be able to deliver across the board. But yeah, overall, that game was just insane by Balkan. The next game was where we got to see the Rock in the top. We're not talking about Swiper, we're talking about the actual Rock, Malphite. Kanga versus Chiefs, where Topoon got 3 solo kills in lane, playing Malphite versus Jace. How do you get a solo kill at level 4 as Malphite in this lane? How does that happen?
Yeah. I don't even know. Like when I watched the draft happen, right? I was like Jace getting Malphite is kind of sad because eventually Jace can't do anything into Malphite, right? Like it's the same as the Poppy matchup like many years ago. Like Jace and the Poppy eventually the tank just gets so tanky that Jace can't do damage to that champion and you just get sort of out-sustained, right? And to think the trade-off in those matchup is that Jace actually gets to abuse the laning phase.
Oh, yeah.
And then Tapoon ends up solo killing him, level 4.
No, like, when I was watching that live, I was like, okay, there's no way he dies here, right? And then he dies to the Malphite Q, and I was like, dude. Because, okay, so the way the matchup works, right, is as soon as Malphite hits level 6 onwards, he has kill threat, right? Before that, Jace gets to do whatever he wants with the lane, right? Malphite can't do shit. So when Jace dies at level 4 and flashes, like that he's just gonna die. He's guaranteed death at least one more time.
He's guaranteed,
right?
Yeah.
Like that's another kill, and then somehow Topoon found another one. This was very reminiscent of some Topoon performances from the OPL where he was just absolutely smashing his opponent later. And as Calvin has coined, the Topoon gap was absolutely prevalent in this game. It was crazy.
I mean, you just gotta have one Topoon gap every single week, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what he's known for. One other point I want to bring up about this game was the draft. So we saw Kanga actually first pick center, which is something we haven't seen, I don't think, in the LCO so far.
Did Order do that?
Sorry?
Or did Order pick center late or early? I forgot. Maybe third pick?
I can't remember right now, but I think it was really interesting to see a center be first picked, and then they picked Ori into Victor. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that matchup winning for Victor because he just outranges Ori? I know it's a decent laning phase for Orianna, but I think after that it becomes quite Victor favored.
Yeah, I think it's mostly a skill matchup. Which player can play the lane better so that they get a bigger lead. Because like if Orianna gets a lead onto Victor, like Victor still gets one shot, right? Yeah. Like Orianna just does so much damage, so is Victor. So I think it's more of like a skill difference or like mid jungle div, if anything. But all in all, like I think the draft is weird because who picks Orianna?
Yeah,
I'm just gonna put it out here, right? Who picks Orianna in 2022? I mean, I don't mean it like no one ever picked Orianna. Like Orianna's a shit champ or anything, but like, why blind pick Orianna second?
It wasn't even blind. It wasn't even blind. It was into Victor.
Oh, was it blind? It was into Victor, right?
Into Victor. So I think at best when you have that matchup, like the best outcome is you're slightly winning lane, and then you're grouping with your jungler. So that's I guess the one benefit Ori has in that it's a bit better of a pairing with your jungler, right? If you have a Xin Zhao, if you have a Lee Sin, it enables your mid jungle 2v2 to be a fair bit more aggressive. But we sort of just saw it like get picked, nothing really happened, and then Victor outscaled. So
Yeah.
I think it was an interesting approach to draft. I just don't know if it was the most effective one.
I mean, it also plays into Chiefs' strength, right? Because like Chiefs, we said it so many times. Chiefs' weakness is mid jungle, and you're playing in sort of like a pretty inert lane into Chiefs.
Yeah.
Right? Like Orianna can't ever solo kill Victor. Victor can never solo kill Orianna. They're both just gonna farm like 12 CS per minute without any jungle intervention, and like then Chiefs just outscales Kanga like as a team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a pattern we're sort of starting to see with these Kanga games is they'll opt for a pretty safe draft and then just sort of get outmatched, outscaled, and then the game's over. So I'd love to see Kanga bust out some more like explosive picks. Like Lemus is known for his Draven in solo queue, right? Maybe you
and Chung is known for his Yasuo.
Yeah, exactly. Like Chunky
Right.
was getting Yasuo Ari bans like essentially all throughout his playing career just because of these pocket picks. So why not create some drafts around those and try to get some wins that way? Because if you're being brutally honest, the way that they're playing the game right now is not going to take them to the top.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally just a slow death. Like, I like to put it this way, right? If you're not doing anything and you don't get out, like you don't outscale, if you're not better players, it's literally a slow death. You can have zero deaths, but you still lose a game.
100%. They're sort of just delaying the inevitable with these drafts. But that brings me to the match of day 2, which was Peace versus Order. And what Order did to Kanga, in terms of absolutely dominating them, Peace did to Order.
That was a yikers, in my opinion. Like, I didn't expect Order to just collapse like this.
Yeah.
I think, Order has such a strong performance in most of the, so far, like every game, right? Even against Chiefs in the early game. And when they get matched against Peace. And this is probably the strength of the Peace lineup. They're so decisive that Order can't even get their early game started.
Yeah, so I think going into this game, Peace had a very strong plan. Like, even if you look at the draft, right, you've got... So Peace picked Camille, Lee Sin, Akali, Caitlyn, Lux, right? Lux is a pick we haven't seen that much of in the LCO because of its ability... Because it's just known for being easy to punish, right? If you're not executing it really well, it's just going to die a million times and your bot lane's going to be over. But Order went for a very Order draft, which was Ornn, Diana, Jace, Jinx, and Thresh. One thing I want to mention is that with Kevy's champion pool comes sort of the responsibility of picking good AD mids, and Peace recognized this, and they banned Yasuo and Yone in the second round, and then you're sort of left with Jace mid. Now, Jace mid, it can work, right? But you don't get as many of the benefits that you do from Jace top lane in being able to, like freely scale, get plates, get a CS lead, because in mid, you're having to do stuff with your jungler. Right? You can't just be like, okay, I'm just going to AFK the first 20 minutes because the game will just be over. Right? So I think draft-wise, Order were left in a bit of a sticky situation in that they didn't really have a good pairing for the Diana.
Yeah, but the thing is, right, I don't think... Like, this is what makes Order draft so... I mean, not draft, but like Order's lineup so good, right? They have Puma. Like, Puma is on an 80 carry that's hyperscales, and this is one of those games where you should just pick double front line in mid lane and top lane. Like, I'm thinking, maybe you could have just gone for a Galio. You could have just gone for something that, that's more utility-like. Let Kevy be the single AP, let Puma be the single AD, and you just go full front to back, right? Double frontliner, you have a Thresh that plays sort of in the middle, and then you have Diana, potentially going in for a huge play that, Kevy's known for, and Puma just as like a late game hyper carry, right? And the fact that they picked Jace is a huge question mark to me. Like, I was streaming and I was just questioning, like, this Jace doesn't fit anything. Like, he doesn't teamfight well. Like, the champion just gets popped in teamfight if he's not fed. And none of his team can poke, right? Diana doesn't poke. Ornn doesn't poke. Thresh doesn't poke. Like, who pokes in Order's comp? Like, you can't poke, you can't teamfight, and I think your silent isn't great into Peace's comp because Akali just kills you off cooldown.
Yeah, and so I can sort of see where Order's coming from with this draft, right? I think it is a very Order draft in that, they've got a very clear 5v5 team comp, right? They want to come to fights, they want to engage with Ornn, engage with Diana. But we literally never saw a 5v5 or even a 4v4 fight this game. Like, not once. And when this happens, right, like, Jace can't do anything in the side lane. He gets killed by Camille, he gets killed by Akali. So he's never going to have pressure on a side lane when he's this far behind. So you're either A, going to have to send Kevy to just sit with him so he can push, or you're just going to have to leave him catching waves, right?
Yeah, and that's not a 5v5 too, right?
And that's not a 5v5. So I would have loved to see some sort of proactivity from Order. Like, Biopanther and Kevy, when they have the tools to be able to engage a fight, they just need to be like, okay, we're gonna fight this. We're gonna sack. Let's sack top turret. We'll just go to this dragon. We're gonna try to force a fight with our ults. Because if we don't, like, how do you win this game realistically?
Yeah, and I think it's hard. Like I think Order, like, this is the weakness that we talked about with Order, right? Like, if mid jungle falls behind, they seem quite lost.
Yeah.
Like, Jace just died off cooldown, and nobody know like how to salvage the game. And another thing that I do want to highlight though is how bot lane didn't really perform that well this week, I think, because Corporal seems to always have this one trade in the early game that sort of doesn't go that well. And I mean, day one he didn't get really punished, and then he eventually punished the Kanga bot lane. But this game it showed, right? Corporal was on Thresh, I think, yeah. And he just died. He just misstepped and he just died. He literally walked into a Caitlyn trap trying to bait the gank, and nothing was able to, like, he couldn't pull off anything. He just died.
Yeah, I think there were definitely some, I guess, points of weakness from Order, but when you look at Peace, one person who I think really stood out to me this game was Tien. Besides missing his hook shot on the wall level 1, which would have gotten him a free kill, he actually tweeted about it. He said, you got to miss the ones at level 1 so you hit every other one in the game. Everyone. So, look, with how he played this game, I think it was a pretty good strategy. But he absolutely, like, ran the map. And when you're against Biopanther, who is notorious for being that player to sack his lane to run the map, Tien was just finding such good roam opportunities and wasn't losing anything top. Like, I mean, he came back after he got Sundara, solo killed Biopanther. Like, he just crushed it this game. Absolute carry performance from Tien.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong though, because like Camille was like 20, 30 CS down the Ornn in the early game, but like that might just be how the matchup goes in the early game. But yeah, like I just love to see top laners that play the carry matchup like a tank and then like make the tank. I mean, it's like, how like when you have Camille into Ornn, right? Ornn is the one that wants to go out of the lane because you eventually lose to Camille.
Yeah.
Right? And then like I just love top laners that pick like this matchup, and then you play Camille to roam, and then the Ornn just can't do anything. Like, you're supposed to walk out of the lane as an Ornn, but then Camille just does the thing before you do, and they just win the game off that.
Well, what I think was really smart from Tien, and I can speak to this a bit as, a certified Camille one trick. Camille vs Ornn it's winning for Ornn in the early game, right? Like pre-Sundara, Ornn wins. The lane becomes, like, as soon as Camille gets Sundara, it's winning for Camille, and it gets more winning after that, right? But up until that point, Ornn should have control of the lane. And I think what Tien has done, or did this game, was he found windows to sort of escape, I guess, the period where he was the weakest, and he was able to impact the map. So it was just absolutely brilliant to see him, and he wasn't down XP. I think that was the biggest thing. Like,
no, he wasn't.
He was down a bit of CS, but XP he always was level with Biopanther. And if you're finding these opportunities as Camille, you're fine. You're not losing anything in lane. Like Ornn, maybe I don't even think he got a single plate. He got one plate. Okay, I'm looking in the early game. He got a single plate. So you're losing a plate, but you're getting a kill and an assist. You're getting your bot lane ahead. You're getting all this stuff, and then you just come back to lane with Sundara and you win. So in terms of how you should part this matchup, I think this is just one of the best examples we've seen.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think so far, like, only 2 top laners are able to do that. Tapoon and Thien. So I'm just going to say, like, Peace, I mean, I'm sorry, Thien. At first, I was just like, Peace might struggle early on because Thien looks like the only carry, and Peace doesn't really have, like, a good carry point. But then Thean is proving me wrong. He's just saying that, yes, I am the carry, and I can make my team the carries too.
Yeah, and I'm going to do
roaming.
absolutely everything on the
Yeah,
map.
Nappy too.
Yeah. So I'm just overall, all around the board, super impressed with Peace. I mean, everyone played really, really well versus Order, and in their earlier game as well. I think there were no glaring points of weakness. It's going to be very interesting to see how they match up against Chiefs next week, whether they can maintain that same level of play. And TN versus Topoon, I think it's a clear top 2 top laners going up against each other. It was the same thing in OPL, actually, which is pretty funny. It was Chiefs versus Legacy. It was always TN versus Topoon as the sort of the big lane to watch. So I'm very excited to see that. Yeah. So our last game that we had was Gravitas versus Mammoth, which was probably one of the most entertaining games of the week, just because of how much of a fiesta it was.
Yeah, it's another form of banger, I think, right?
Yeah.
Like, last week we joked about, the fact that we have Gravitas versus Mammoth means that we get, like, 3 good games. But then, to be fair, I quite enjoyed the Gravitas Mammoth game. Like, my mind was absolutely broken. Like, I tweeted something like, I struggled to understand this game on Twitter.
Absolutely.
Because I just couldn't understand. Like, it was just throws after throws after throws. I was just like, oh, Mammoth's gonna win this game now, and then, oh wait, no, Gravitas gonna win. Oh wait, no, Mammoth's gonna win now. Like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, I think draft as well was such an int from the side of Gravitas. Like, if you just pick anything that's not Gragas into Irelia, you have Irelia, you have Wukong, you have into Null. You have Irelia, you have Wukong, you have Jace, you have even Lucian. Like, literally anything that
right?
would beat Na in lane, and you have 3 winning lanes. How does that enemy team play the game? They're all scaling. You're just going to steamroll them by 15 minutes, right?
You have 3 winning lanes. You win team fight and you win split.
Yeah, there's no way to lose it. But
there's no way.
And then they pick Gragas into Na. Like, you're literally giving them a winning lane that they can play around. It was just, I don't know. It was crazy. I don't want to talk about it too much. We already talked about it in the Arsh interview. It's going to tilt me. But one thing I do want to talk about is who we decided to give the week 2 MVP to. Calvin, would you like to announce it? I'll give you a bit of a drum roll.
Yeah?
Go.
Okay, so the MVP, the week 2 MVP from the LCO show is Mammoth Rufuri.
Yes.
Yay! So the reason why we gave Rufuri the MVP is because without this player, I don't think Mammoth would win both games.
No, 100%, especially in the PGG game, but to an extent in the Gravitas game as well. Rufuri just was the point of strength for his team, right?
Yes.
We saw Tron, I guess, carry it a bit later in the game, but to be able to get the start and even giving your team the confidence that you can win versus PGG is huge, right?
Yes.
It's like seeing your Trendomir absolutely beat up his opposing laner just elevates everyone on Mammoth to be like, okay, this game's winnable, right? And then they start playing better, they start having more confidence, and I think, yeah, he just had a really standout performance. And to be honest, I was surprised by him. I think a lot of people, obviously, because he was playing on Mammoth and there is that sort of, association with it. But the fact that he was able to have such dominating performances, I'm really excited to see how he can develop and grow as a player.
Yeah, 100%. And I do want to have like an honorable mention here, and that is Beat for his absolutely stunning performance this week. I mean, he was very close. Like, I had Beat at first, and then I just changed it with Fury because I was thinking, all right, so most, like, MVP literally stands for most valuable player, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, I think Beast played really well, but like everyone on Please played really well as well. So, and Fury is just this.
He was just a cut above the rest.
Yeah,
on Mammoth.
Like he's just so good this week that without him, I think Mammoth might just go 0-2.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I guess that almost brings us to the end. We will wrap up with a quick preview of the big games to watch in week 3. So, one I'm really excited to watch as a member of Order is Order versus PGG. Both of these teams are at 2-2, not where they'd be hoping to be, right? This will be a really good game to sort of see, has Order learnt from their Peace game, and what Order will show up, right? Because the Order that showed up versus Kangar compared to the Order that showed up versus Peace were night and day, right? So it'll be really interesting to see whether Order can sort of get back to being consistent and playing at that level that they can, or whether PGG will just roll them and Belkan will have one of his crazy performances again.
Yeah, I think next week is going to be like the showcase for, all the teams' relative strength, right? Because we do have the match of the week in Chiefs versus Peas, both undefeated teams. One team is going to lose that undefeated status.
Yeah.
And then we have Order versus Pentanet. Both teams, they look very strong on paper. They look to be the potential LCO title contenders, but both teams struggle at some point. Right, Pentanet struggles around mid lane. Order struggles when they fall behind early. So this probably will define which team is that better team. And then we also have Kanga Gravitas. Maybe Gravitas can pull off a win with how Kanga is actually just like sort of slowly losing their own game. And then Mammoth versus Direwolves. It's literally a proof whether Mammoth is that good or. Or Direwolves is stomping, and also like Mammoth is just overrated.
Yeah. And then I guess the third big match that we have is PGG versus Chiefs. Now this is for a lot of people, I guess a grand final preview, but neither like PGG is not at the top, right? So we definitely can't be calling it a grand final preview now, given they're 2-2, right? But I think this will be a really good match, and we get to see the battle of the imports, right?
Yes.
Will Yuri and Belkan level up and be able to beat Topwin and Miria? Because right now it feels like Belkan is outperformed like far better than Yuri. At least he's playing better than Yuri, and Topwin is playing far better than Arthur. Right, so it'll be interesting to see whether top gap is bigger than jungle gap in this game. But anyway, that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm super glad that we can have this episode out on YouTube finally.
Don't jinx it.
I'm not going to jinx it, but it should be out on YouTube. So follow us on all of our socials. That LCO show on everything. And we will see you guys next week. Calvin, thank you for joining me. And that is it. So see you guys later. Bye.